From our earliest days, we have had two archivists to help us. One of those is not able to be here today. She has been made an honorary member by the Society, and we have a plaque of these honorary members. This one is Thea Neal, who from the very beginning was responsible for organizing of our cataloging of the materials we have been accumulating. And of course, accompanying her from the very beginning and assisting in that process, Dorcas McCormick. We are most fortunate to have as our speaker today an individual who spoke to us on our initial community meeting. A man who has been associated with this community from its very beginnings and has been our mentor and guide over these many, many years. He will speak to us briefly and then we'll answer some questions. Bill Williams.
Thank you, President Walker. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the Leisure World Historical Society and guests, it's really a pleasure to be here today. I don't know how many years ago it was that I made a presentation concerning the origins of Leisure World originally, but how many years ago was that, Mr. Walker, do you recall? It's been a long time. And I have become, I think, the historian almost for Leisure World by reason of the length of time that I've been here. When I was a young man, I used to fly airplanes in the Navy out of Los Alamitos Air Station. I was at that time an aviation cadet and used to fly over where Leisure World's situated now. Probably the first time I really became aware of the area because many was the time with our old planes we thought we might be crashing here. Instead of that, we'd turn and fly along the extension of 7th Street out towards Santa Ana and fly over the ocean. Actually, as far as the presence of Leisure World is concerned, though, I knew this property from having been a native of this area myself, having been born in Long Beach, and for many years saw the farming that went on here and was part of the Hillman Ranch. About 1960, Ross Cortese, who had developed Rossmore, purchased this land from the Hillman family, from the Hillman estate up north. I don't know what he paid for it, but if anybody ever became really interested in it, we'll have to find out for him. But he then divided it into the parcels which you have for your mutual corporations. He took out the corner where the shopping center is and some of the frontage on Seal Beach Boulevard for the purpose of commercial development. And then he built the shopping center. He sold the property, which is Leisure World, to the Golden Rain Foundation for $10 million. Through the years as an attorney, I have seen many, many contracts for sales, and that was, if you really think about it, in 1960, that's quite a huge sale. But the sales agreement for this sale was a one-page letter directed to the Golden Rain Foundation and a president or the administrative officer who was a man named Louis Letson. This was an in-house transaction. That letter was sufficient, though, for, at that time, FHA for the purpose of initiating financing for Leisure World. The construction started, I can't tell you exactly when, probably about 1961, early there, or late 60. And the purpose of the mutual corporations really was to facilitate the construction of Leisure World in increments. Because at that time, just as at any time under a development, there's no clear understanding of how well this thing is going to sell. And so it was built in increments. And those increments are almost equal, pretty much. Some of the mutuals are a little larger, like Mutual One, I think, is larger than most. But the increments were only for the purpose of a gradual development. And because each is financed separately, each mortgage parcel of each mutual is financed under a separate mortgage. And if you look at the list of people who hold the mortgages on Leisure World, you may find hundreds of banks that own various mortgages related to mortgage parcels. One good news, of course, all of you are aware of, we're becoming very close to the time when those mortgages will be paid off. Starting next year, some should be paid off. By 2005, all those mortgages should be paid off. When Mr. Cortese built this project, they had a grand plan, and he truly was a man of vision. It doesn't matter what later happened or what the feelings were of the people concerning him or the Golden Rain Foundation or the National Golden Rain Foundation. He truly was a man of great vision. When the project was initiated, there was no law related to what the requirements were for a senior citizen community, but the FHA and he had gotten together concerning the financing of this, and FHA really was sold on Mr. Cortese as far as constructing this, and they got very close concerning this. They had a lawyer by the name of Oakley Hunter, who later became the attorney or the head of Fannie Mae, that you've all heard of. It's a stock company now traded. But he was very personal and very, very sharp lawyer. He prepared most of the documents related to Leisure World, and someday, if you really want to spend a couple of weeks reviewing the finances and the history of your mutual, then the thing to do is ask Mr. Narang if you can go into the archives, and you'll find huge boxes of documents, many boxes of documents related to each mortgage parcel. For each mortgage parcel was a little financial center in and of itself. That mortgage was made for the purpose of constructing and building those apartments, making contributions for the creation of the trust assets at Leisure World. The trust assets, as you know, consist of the streets, sidewalks, the lighting, the clubhouses, the amphitheater, everything that was involved for the community were in the trust and are still in the trust. At that time, there was this clubhouse. There was Clubhouse 2 over by the power station, Clubhouse 3 near where Clubhouse 4 is, and Clubhouse 4 was created many years later, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. At the time this project was completed, as I say, it was about the last portion that was created in 1965. I first became connected with Leisure World in November of 1963. And a friend of mine had moved here. He was a retired policeman from the Long Beach Police Department. His name was Les Dries. And he liked what he found, but he didn't like the way it was run. And he came to see me. I was a lawyer then in 1963 and had been for about 10 years. And he came to my office and explained to me how much he and his wife Vita, how much they enjoyed this place. But they didn't have any kind of self-rule. They were being run by outside people. And one of the things in the creation of this, as you know, to touch the structure, the mutual corporation has bylaws, and the mutual parcels at that time each elected a member of the board of directors for the mutual. The Golden Rain Foundation was consisting of people who were elected from each mutual for that mutual to be on the Golden Rain board. And there were as many directors on the Golden Rain Foundation as there were mutuals, except a couple of mutuals had the right to elect 2 because of the size of their mutual. And those people had been pretty much appointed to the position. There was no popular election to elect the first board of directors. And the residents of Leisure World were not real happy about that. And that's why Mr. Dries came to see me. And I talked, to be very candid with you, I had not the faintest concept of these kinds of corporations. I was a trial lawyer, a jury trial lawyer. I did jury trials all the time. And I enjoyed that. And it was a little cluttering for me to be faced with the prospect of a situation where there were some 18 total corporations, and I wasn't a corporate lawyer. I said, maybe I'll get you a corporate lawyer. Well, he's Bill, you know, we know you and we like you. And he says, I'd like to come back and talk to you some more. So we had another meeting about a week later. This time, there were 3 people from Leisure World. And I'll fast forward this. Each meeting, there were more and more people coming until finally I was not able to accommodate meetings in my office. And I had a pretty good sized office. So the next meeting, he said, we're going to have 70 people come. I said, well, they're not coming to my office because I couldn't even get them standing room hardly in. So we arranged with the city of Seal Beach to use the city council chambers. And the city permitted us to do that for all the meetings after that. By this time, we're up to December of 1963. And it became apparent that the people were very unhappy and restless. Today, you would say, well, this is just a bunch of really rabble-rousers who just want to cause trouble. But the people were sincerely and truly upset about the fact that they were not in control of their own destiny as far as Leisure World is concerned. So the purpose in having me was, can you show us how to correct this? And, oh, they said, incidentally, there's one other thing. We don't have any money. Lawyer's existence, you know, there was a politician here, what's his name, Jesse Unruh. He said, money is the mother's milk of politics. And money is also the mother's milk of practicing law. And as well, I had gotten in too deep then. I couldn't let that stand in the way. And they said, you've got to help us find a way in order to achieve what we want, which is self-rule. The relationship between the residents and the administration had become very strained. There were some really very fantastic people involved in this who were really, truly dedicated and concerned. If I name one, I slight others, so I won't name any of them except Mr. Dreiss, who initiated this with me. There were people of stature who had moved here and determined they wished to live in Leisure World, which was known as Rossmore Leisure World, which was changed later, but after they became in control. But the thing got a little rough. There became, matter of fact, it became very rough. There were other groups that were being motivated by unknown forces who indicated that the people that I was representing were less than honest, who weren't people that should be in control of anything, let alone Leisure World. One man was accused of fraud. It was not in this clubhouse, but a great meeting in Clubhouse 2. There were hundreds, if you can envision this clubhouse, packed to the walls of people who were very loud and noisy. And the lawyer for Rossmore got up and spoke about newspaper articles and a complaint that had been filed in Santa Barbara County accusing this Leisure World resident, who was really the titular head of the people running this revolution, accusing him of fraud. I mean, this was really serious allegations. He asked me to come, not to represent him, but to speak on behalf of the people that I was representing by this time, a group of about 200 people. And if I would speak as to the significance of someone alleging in court that you were a fraudulent person, you know, you can allege in court whatever you wish, but the facts have to be proven in court. So it's only what's proven in court what is true, not what's alleged in a piece of paper. You know, luck has a lot to do with life. I think all of us here realize that. 2 days before I was to come out and speak on behalf of this man, I ran across a newspaper article concerning Walnut Creek. which is another leisure world up near San Francisco. A piece of litigation had been filed accusing Mr. Cortese of fraud. Now that had no significance, truly, as to his being fraudulent. It was just another case, someone had made the allegation. So when I was defending our speaker for the group against the allegations of fraud that were brought against him, I said, and we don't think this means anything. It doesn't mean anything as far as Mr. Cortese, because he has been accused of fraud, brought the house down. You can't imagine. I always felt that that was the turning point in what happened after that. Then to fast forward a little bit more, the community facilities were all operating pretty much by this time, and the thing was running pretty good. And the election for the board of directors was to come up then, just as it does now, in June. And I helped these people engineer their campaigns, and they had a successful election. And they elected the people onto the Golden Rain Foundation board, who were in this group of people who had come to see me, for every Golden Rain board position except one. The previous president, who was the first president of the Golden Rain Foundation, who was a resident, were elected to the board. And their first action was to start dismantling what had been put together. There was an organization that was put together called the National Golden Rain Foundation. The National Golden Rain Foundation was intended as to be similar in operation to our Golden Rain Foundation, except it would control all of the Golden Rain Foundations of all of the leisure worlds that were to be built around the world. All the ones in California, all the ones in New Jersey. There was, I believe there was one to be built in Switzerland. They didn't all become completed, but as you know, there were several other leisure worlds built, including a Laguna. And at that first meeting, the board decided they wanted to have an office, because there was no office for board members. They were only a decoration for this place. As far as the Golden Rain board was concerned, they weren't really operating the place. Across the street, almost right across the street from this clubhouse, there was a vacant apartment, and they assumed that apartment to be the office of the Golden Rain Foundation Board of Directors. And they made a deal with me to come out and be here one day a week to watch what they were doing and see what was right and what they could do. We didn't keep that up very long, because that didn't work out too well, because they had something happening all the time, but not necessarily on the day I was here. So we made a different arrangement. One of the things that they said when we won, we had a meeting to celebrate, and they said, "Bill, you are our lawyer for life." And little did I know, I thought that was a nice joke. Little did I know, that's almost true now. Because that was 37 years ago. One of the things that occurred, one of the very nasty things that occurred to one of the people who was in this group, was that he was on the telephone to me at home one evening, and he said he heard something funny on his phone. He said, "I'll call you later." He went to a payphone and called me back on a payphone, and he said, "I think my phone's bugged." I said, "Oh, I can't believe that." And he said, "I think it is." I said, "Okay, you go back and call me on the phone. In the meantime, I'll call the police department at Seal Beach, and we'll tell them we think this is happening." So he went home. In the meantime, I called the police department. They came out here. And so he and I talked nonsensically for about a half hour, and the police drove around and found a panel truck two blocks away from his house with two men operating a phone bugging system. They were arrested and taken to court. And no point in discussing now, because I don't know who they worked for. They just were charged with felonies, and what disposition was made of their case, I don't know. That's how bad this got. It got bad enough, it was bad enough by then, people who had bought apartments, and all the apartments sold for about $10,000. Some were 12, but they all sold for about 10 with $1,000 down. It got so bad, though, people were putting little signs over in a grocery store, please take over the payments on my apartment, I'll give it to you free. This was the way it was. We had incidents occur, we had litigation arise, and I have to speed up faster here because unfortunately, I could talk to you for a long time about this. Around here, we had a lot of FBI people because Mr. Cortese liked them, retired people. And these retired FBI agents were officers and operatives in the Golden Ring Foundation and the National Golden Ring Foundation. We gained rule through the Golden Ring Foundation for Leisure World, but not as a matter of real operation. We communicated with the FHA, and they, as can well be imagined, liked Mr. Cortese because he was a solid, steady, reliable person in the operation of this kind of a project. But these people were happy, and finally we were able to convince them that the Golden Ring Foundation wished to hire its own administrator. They acquiesced in that. One of the people in this group who is now on the board of directors had a close friend in the real estate business who was a good administrator, and he thought he would like to get him, and he convinced the rest of the board members to hire him, and the FHA agreed to it. And I must say, FHA was here on a daily basis because they were upset about this happening. They really wanted to leave everything status quo, but they saw it wasn't happening. The man that was hired by this first board of directors was only here maybe 2 months, and he obviously made a determination in his own mind that maybe his future really would lie with Mr. Cortese and not with these people who had taken over the Golden Ring Foundation. And so his actions began to speak that philosophy. And the board, of course, became most unhappy again. And FHA said, hey, wait, we gave you what you wanted. Now you want to get rid of it? What's wrong with you people? What kind of thing have we gotten ourselves into? Finally settled down, and they were able then to make a new deal, and they made it with J.L. Moyer. The rest is history. After they had been through these initial stages of difficulty in the administration, when they got the J.L. Moyer coming, you all, I think, pretty much aware of that Jack Davis came. Everybody here was so happy with him, and he continued when First Columbia got into it, and Mr. Narang, and it went through that progression to the point where you are today. And FHA, of course, was very happy. And through the years, FHA has gradually, more and more and more, been unconcerned with what happened at Leisure World, till they reach a point now that Mr. Narang, I'm sure, will admit that he has trouble getting their interest. They say, just go ahead and do what you think is right. Go ahead and do it. And that's the way it's been. From the standpoint of legality, it's been a dream client for me because they do everything you say, and they've stayed out of trouble for these 37 years of any significant problem. And we have really been very, very fortunate in all that's happened. The project has been through many, many phases. One of the things that we had in the early years was the fact that when we were just discussing it, when they wanted cable television in Leisure World, probably 25, 30 years ago. And we got a cable company, made a contract with it, and I had researched and discovered that we owned a conduit, which was part of the community facilities, and we're in the trust. And so I said, you can put the cable through that conduit. As soon as they started, GTE, who was a telephone company here, sued us to enjoin us from using their conduit. And that suit ended very quickly when they found out we owned the conduit. I think that you all understand the methodology for the operation when we refer to trust assets is that you as a shareholder own a right to occupy an apartment in your mutual. The mutual corporation is the beneficiary of a trust that was created for all of the community facilities, and each of you are members of that Golden Ring Foundation. So in essence, the residents are the bottom line of control here. And it was through the efforts of these early people that you today, I think you have a pure line of control from each of you individually into the Golden Rain Foundation and into the Mutual Corporation boards of directors. You have self-rule. I don't think anyone can doubt that. Some people don't like that in some respects of what happens. They would have it some other way. But to me, I feel through these years to watch this thing turn into a really, really tranquil, beautiful operation. Now, when this thing first started, part of your carrying charges was medical coverage. In other words, you had a right to go to the clinic and you were covered medically. This worked for about 2 years, and 2 years in the early 1960, this medical coverage plan lost about $2.5 million. And it ended. And then I created for the Golden Rain Foundation, because some people indicated they would still like to have medical coverage, we created what I like to call, it was one of the first HMOs in California. It actually wasn't first because I got the idea out of a case in San Diego, and we followed the pattern of those people and created our own Golden Rain Foundation at HMO, which was about $6 a month, and whoever belonged to that could go to the medical clinic. When Medicare came in, there was no need for that, and it fell away. There's a time with Leisure World that really was a difficulty for people, and that was in the inception. As it has gotten better and better and more freedom has occurred, there has been a desire to change things, and those changes have been made as we went along. Some of the other things about the early times, if you look at the northwest corner of Leisure World, there's a grassy area over there. That was when the state of California made a determination at one time to run the freeway around that corner and down to Seal Beach. Fortunately, they ran out of money, but they didn't run out of money before they bought that corner and took 44 apartments out of Mutual 9. So it was necessary for us to make some dealings with the state, which we did. They took that corner, which was approximately an acre, and then they gave us, in exchange, plus some money, the land where Clubhouse 4 is, together with the Mutual 9 apartments, there are 44 of them, just to the west of Clubhouse 4. Those were constructed. We got the land for Clubhouse 4, and that's how it came about. Mutual 17 was another aspect of this. As I told you early on, Mr. Cortese, in subdividing this, had retained some Seal Beach Boulevard frontage, and it didn't work out. This thing didn't work out as everyone planned, so that property just sat there vacant. That land was then purchased because it became available, and the Golden Rain Foundation purchased it, and that's where we now have built Mutual 17 and 126 apartments that are in there. Those 126 apartments came in 4 phases, and we ran those through the Department of Real Estate, created 126 new memberships in the Golden Rain Foundation. Those people paid a contribution to the trust that was maintained for all the community facilities in order that they could use those, and became full-fledged members of the Golden Rain Foundation. With respect to Leisure World also, the sales office was not there originally, and we determined that the sales office would be built. And the reason was because people were paying too much in the way of commissions, they felt, to real estate brokers outside of Leisure World to make a sale of a unit here at Leisure World. So when we built that sales office and it was staffed and started operating, there was one real estate broker who lived in Leisure World who worked for an outside broker. And he said, well, we don't like this. And it was a very large broker, so we're going to sue you. And he said, we've talked to our lawyers, and you, Mr. Williams, and the Golden Rain Board have violated not only the California Cartwright Act, which is an antitrust legislation, but also the Sherman Antitrust Act, and you all are going to jail. And so they sued us. We went to court, and no point trying to educate you on preliminary motions related to litigation, but I filed what you would call a preliminary motion to their litigation, and their lawsuit lasted about 2 weeks because the court dismissed it on the first time we went to court. And so I told him, and this man, I smoked in those days, and he'd do it. And when we're in a courthouse, and he says, and I'm not going to even send cigarettes for you when you're in jail. And so when we came out of the courtroom, I said, well, I guess I'm going to be able to buy my own cigarettes now. And he's a very unhappy man, and he continued to live here, though, continued to work for that broker. But all of you know the Leisure World sales office has been a blessing for the people in Leisure World because it saved them mega dollars. It's a long story, and I can't tell it in a few minutes as I have here. I'm going to answer questions in a minute, but I would like to close this with a little bit related to the future of Leisure World. We have, through the auspices of the Golden Rain Foundation, made every attempt to preserve life as you know it here at Leisure World. This has created some difficulties in the law through the years. Approximately, I can't tell you the year, but I think about 1985, the administrator here was a Mr. Lafferty. And Mr. Lafferty advised me that they had information that a senator by the name of Boatwright was attempting to pass some legislation in the California legislature that restricted senior citizen communities to some extent. There was litigation around by the U.S. or by the California Supreme Court that had indicated we could continue with the system that we had here of a senior citizen community, but it was a little edgy because there were then coming things of tenant rights and people having rights to real estate who weren't in the category of those who were sought to be benefited, such as senior citizens. Well, it was a good idea to maybe try to change the law to legitimatize a senior citizen community. But when he did this, he created rights in other people, which we perceived to be the prospect of people who were not, at that time, 52 years of age was our criterion. That people under 52 years of age would be able to live here, predicated on marriage and on caregiving and things of that nature. Golden Rain Foundation said we would like to preserve what we have as long as possible. Mr. Lafferty and I went to Sacramento twice, and we joined with the attorneys and officers from Laguna Hills and made every effort to stop this legislation to the extent that it was being made and the expansion of those who could live at Leisure World, insofar as criteria was concerned. The legislation was passed, and so then we tried to avoid it as long as possible and did so for 10 years. We were threatened with much litigation. The age for living here was changed to 55 pursuant to that legislation, but it created the opportunity for people to live here who, without limit as to age. And so we defended those as long as we could. We finally reached a point after 10 years of that defense when we had to give a little bit of ground through some litigation with the state. So as you know, probably each of you knows someone who's living at Leisure World who is not 55 years of age. There are other areas regarding that we've tried to defend and protect, and we'll continue to do that because it's been indicated through the Golden Rain Foundation that there is a desire here on the part of everyone to try to preserve what we have here just as best possible. I wish I had another hour because there's so much I could tell you more, but I have to stop because I know I've exceeded the time that I should, but I'll be happy to answer any questions if we have time for questions. Thank you.
You said that they told you at a rather late stage in the negotiations that they had no money. Did they ever get any money? What, 37 years?
That group did. Before, this started in November, and before June of 1964, when they had the election, they had taken a collection among the people who were attending the meetings at Seal Beach, and at one of those meetings, along in May, after we concluded the meeting, one of them came over and handed me a check and said, "We know this doesn't pay you for all the time you've done this. We want to give this to you." And they gave me a check for $3,000.
Two questions. The one, I don't understand what the national goal is, but also, will there be any change when the government is not involved and the mortgage is paid off? Do you foresee any change at all?
That's a question that I've heard a great deal, and I think the easiest answer is to indicate there should be no significant change of any kind. You have to bear in mind that the mortgages are just like a house payment, and when they're paid off, nothing really changes in your house ownership, but there's more here to hold in check any great changes occurring, and that is the fact that the Golden Rain Foundation exists and controls and owns all the community facilities here, including the streets, the lights, the sidewalks, all those things I indicated before. Those are held in a trust, and the Golden Rain Foundation is a trustee. The Golden Rain Board are the controlling officers of that trust. That trust continues until, this is a legal formula, and it's in the trust, and it was at the time the creation of the trust was the total law, was a thing called a rule against perpetuities. In other words, you can't create something legally that's theoretically can last forever in the nature of a trust, where property never vests in somebody. So this trust was ruled under the rule against perpetuities, and when it was created, it was given a life of the life expectancy of all of the people who are residents of Seal Beach Mutual Number 1, plus 21 years following the date of death of the last survivor of that group. It's been necessary from the inception for the administration to keep a list of the people who live in Mutual 1, and Mr. Narang is still keeping that list. And they have to keep a list as to the date of decease of all those people. When the last ascertainable person in that group becomes deceased, that trust will continue for another 21 years. Sometimes people are asking me, well, when's that going to be? And I say the best I can answer is somewhere between the year 2030 and the year 2040. And fortunately, when that happens, I won't be here. I won't have to solve the problem. But at that time, a great change will occur, because it will be up then to the residents and to the mutual corporations as to what they wish to do with the community facilities. I would, if I were guessing right now, I'd say they have to continue the same way they are, because the beneficiaries of the trust are the mutual corporations, so that they each, not the residents per se, but the mutual, so that they would have to make that determination. The mortgage payoff, though, won't create any new rights in anybody. It may make it easier for some transactions, personal transactions related to owning an interest in an apartment. The ways that we cannot do now will be available then for, as far as ownership is concerned. We're restricted by HUD a lot, who can own it and why and how. Those things will change, but it won't make any great change in the operation.
I must say
Yes.
thank you for the tremendous story.
You've told us, I started as a part of my teacher training had been civics, and your story, meeting you, is tremendous. 10 years ago, I did, in real estate sales, we always would ask for the title company when people wanted to list their property. And so, of course, that immediately came to mind to me here, and we didn't know till afterwards. And people have assured me since but I just like to know, as a matter of public record, could we see a copy of the title deed? I think it'll make us feel better.
The letter?
The title deed that's in the, the title in the public record.
The deed,
Yeah.
the deed to the goal, yes, it's, I don't know if Mr. Ray has it in the county recorder's office at Santa Ana, but you probably somewhere there's a copy of it, but the contract for the sale that I was indicating, the contract for the sale was so fascinating to me that here's a short personal letter, which is the bill of sale for Leisure World. I think that someday someone ought to maybe frame that and hang it up in the administration building. But the deed itself is available, yes.
Mr. Williams, what's Leisure World's relationship to the new legislation regarding animals?
Well, if you don't mind, I would like to reserve talking about that to some other time, but I'll say this, that Leisure World, as I indicated, from the first time that you became self-ruled, and even before, the residents determined that they didn't wish to have animals here. They made that determination. And they would like, probably, I haven't seen any indication of anyone's desire to change that. The mutuals are free to make a change any day they wish. Some mutuals have, I understand. We have new laws to contend with, so I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't get myself into a jam here about how much we can say about it, but I think times are changing. Does that answer it all?
Mr. Williams, how many original owners are still in Mutual 1 and 2?
I don't know, Mr. Ray, do you know?
About, I think there's still anywhere around 20. I think we still have 20.
In Mutual One?
Mutual One. As I say, you take 21 years after maybe you can see how I've computed. I've done that since probably 1965 when I've been asked about when that trust will expire. I've used that estimate of 2030 since then, and I think you can see how I've arrived at it. But I don't know the ages of those people, but it's a controlling factor. Thank you very much for having me here today. I've enjoyed it very much.
How fortunate we are to have had the advantage of this vivid presentation of how we came to be. Mr. Williams did not exaggerate when he talked about how unique and significant this institution is. How many of you have ever heard of AHA? That's the American Association of Homes for the Aging. If any of you had ever had the privilege of attending one of their meetings, you would develop a vivid awareness of the terrible tensions that exist between owners, management, and residents in most senior communities. This came to be a community that is exceptional in terms of its governance and the relationship between those of us who own the property and those of us who live there because we are one and the same. The Historical Society, of course, was created and exists for the purpose of perpetuating the records of this community in which we live. We're only 8 years old. Initially, in the first year, there were some 20 members. We have more than trebled that number. The exhibits here at our office is indicative of the success we've had in accumulating a variety of types of materials that represent that record. I'd like to comment briefly on certain recent things that we are doing. We have now bound copies of all of our local paper available in our office. Due to Carol Rasmussen, I'm sorry, Carol. We have a collection of slides that's available to be viewed. We are going to shortly receive the videos of our Video Society here, which literally number in the dozens. This, along with the collections that we have here, now make it possible for us in our office to make available to residents to appreciate and understand and view a variety of kinds of evidence that would be, I think, of great interest to you. We are thus ambitious in an attempt to expand the resources that we have in this community. And on top of this, 1922 is the 40th anniversary of this community.
1922?
2002. I tried to correct myself, Claire. I think that our society will want to be quite active in helping celebrate that particular anniversary. This takes bodies. We've had some very able, capable, and dedicated people, but we need more, particularly if we are going to make available to the community the resources that we have available here. And thus, we have a questionnaire that was prepared in which we are asking you how you would or could or are willing to participate in our activities and give that information to us. You may deposit it after you fill it out in that basket over on the table, leave it in our office, or mail it to my home address. Now, I do not want to accuse my wife of being Machiavellian, but she's collected a lot of money without a very good record of who she collected it from. And this involves memberships. Now, all you have to do is indicate on this form as you fill it out that you have paid your dues and you will be in good standing for the coming year. But we do need more people for a variety of kinds of things, and whether you can do it yourself or you know of others who you think might be interested, anything you do to spread the word that we need more able-bodied help, we would appreciate it. Particularly, may I say, we need a secretary. For years, my wife was a secretary. She was replaced by an individual who married and moved out of the community. Another secretary had to resign due to bad health, and as a consequence, we do not have a person to keep adequate secretarial records at the present time. If you know of anyone who you think might be willing to undertake that task, or if any of you would, we would appreciate it. If not, if any of you would know of an individual who would be willing to take minutes at our monthly meeting and be paid, I think, adequately for it, we would like that information. That this is a real bottleneck as far as we're concerned, and we would sure like to have it solved. But as you see, We have lovely quarters here. Things are humming along. We want them to move even faster. We want to do even more. And we are grateful for you as members to have supported our activities. And I hope that the year ahead will be even more successful than we have had in the past. We appreciate your presence. We appreciate your support. And above all, if you paid your $5, make sure you fill out this form. Thank you all for coming. Some of you may have questions. Some of you may have comments or suggestions. We'd appreciate them.
You mean right now?
Right now? Well, as usual, I manage to stifle discussion. I have great success in that respect. Thank you again.